You've just witnessed someone destroy their most meaningful relationship in a matter of minutes, and they have absolutely no idea what happened. How is this possible? 6 hidden psychological signals are sabotaging the smartest people on the planet, turning their greatest strengths into their most destructive weapons. Picture this. A brilliant executive constantly complains about colleagues being unreliable while showing up late to every meeting himself. A devoted mother criticizes the selfish people around her while planning every family activity according to her own preferences. A loving partner accuses their significant other of emotional coldness while shutting down every attempt at deeper conversation. These individuals don't realize they're trapped in unconscious patterns that Sigmund Freud decoded over a century ago. Their behavior follows 6 concealed signals of the human psyche, signals that determine whether relationships flourish or crumble. Freud discovered that the unconscious mind speaks its own language, continuously broadcasting messages through our actions, words and reactions. Those who understand this language recognize not only the true motives of others, but also their own hidden driving forces. Today, we're deciphering these 6 signals together. Prepare to transform your understanding of human relationships forever. The first and most powerful signal reveals itself in what people criticize most harshly in others. Imagine this scenario. Your friend tells you for the 3rd time this week about how shallow and materialistic her new neighbor is. She describes in detail the expensive handbags, pristine car, and designer clothes. Her voice grows sharper, her criticism more emotional. These people only think about status symbols, she says, shaking her head while unconsciously adjusting her own expensive jewelry. What's really happening here? Freud would immediately recognize projection, one of the most fundamental defense mechanisms of the human psyche. Projection means we transfer our own repressed desires, fears, or characteristics onto other people. The unconscious mind cannot handle internal conflicts, so it pushes them outward. Suddenly, it's others who possess these bad qualities. Your friend isn't really criticizing the neighbor. She's battling her own materialistic desires that she can't acknowledge. Perhaps she was taught as a child that money was unimportant. Maybe she feels ashamed of her own status cravings. The unconscious mind solves this conflict elegantly by projecting forbidden desires onto the neighbor where they can be safely criticized. Freud found this pattern everywhere. The husband who constantly accuses his wife of infidelity while cheating himself. The mother who calls her son selfish while scheduling his appointments around her own needs. The boss who criticizes employees for laziness while procrastinating on important decisions himself. You recognize this signal by its emotional intensity. Rational criticism is factual and proportionate. You spot projection when the reaction seems disproportionate. The person becomes emotional, obsessively repeats their criticism, cannot let the topic go. Even more revealing. Pay attention to what people spontaneously and repeatedly criticize in others. This criticism acts like an X-ray of their own repressed personality aspects. Why does this matter to you? Because projection poisons relationships. People who project don't see others as independent individuals, but as screens for their internal conflicts. They fight in others what they cannot accept in themselves. Simultaneously, projection becomes a gift for those who understand it. When someone harshly criticizes you, ask yourself, what might this person be unable to accept in themselves? Often you'll understand not only their behavior better, but also recognize their hidden struggles and respond with greater compassion. Next time someone speaks emotionally about others' faults, listen more carefully. The unconscious always reveals its secrets. You just need to know how to listen. Have you ever noticed that you react particularly strongly to certain qualities in other people? But projection is only the beginning. The second signal hides even deeper in how people speak when their ego feels threatened. The second signal reveals itself in the words people use when their ego comes under pressure. Picture this. A colleague arrives an hour late to an important presentation. Instead of apologizing, he says, "Today's traffic was impossible. Besides, I worked until midnight on this project yesterday, while others went home on time. Really? The company should organize better parking. His voice sounds slightly irritated, almost accusatory, as if he's the victim of circumstances. What are you really hearing? Freud would identify several defense mechanisms simultaneously: rationalization, denial, and displacement. The unconscious mind cannot tolerate ego damage. Guilt, shame, or incompetence are unbearable to the psyche, so it develops lightning-fast linguistic strategies to protect self-image. Rationalization transforms embarrassing truths into logical-sounding explanations. I wasn't late. External circumstances were to blame. The unconscious invents plausible reasons for unwanted behavior. Denial erases unpleasant realities. Actually, I'm very reliable. The person constructs an alternative reality where their behavior is consistent and praiseworthy. Displacement redirects blame and anger onto safe targets. Instead of self-criticism, traffic, the company, or others become the problem. Notice these linguistic patterns. People in defensive mode use remarkably many justifications for simple facts. They explain more than necessary. They use phrases like actually, normally, basically, essentially, words that construct an ideal version of reality, particularly revealing a spontaneous justifications for behavior nobody has criticized. A mother says, unprompted, "I don't spoil my child, I just give him what he needs." A partner explains, "I'm not jealous, I'm just concerned." These people are fighting internal accusations that their unconscious projects outward. Freud recognized that language always betrays true psychological conflicts. People don't just talk about the external world, they talk about their internal reality. Every justification is an admission, every explanation a hidden confession of guilt. The signal becomes clearer under stress. When people feel threatened, the unconscious activates its protective mechanisms more intensely. Language becomes more defensive, complicated, emotional. Simple facts get reinterpreted into complicated stories. Why should you recognize this? Because people in defensive mode cannot communicate honestly, not even with themselves. They're fighting internal truths that are too painful. Real understanding becomes impossible as long as the ego must defend itself. At the same time, these linguistic signals show you where people are vulnerable. Behind every justification lies self-doubt. Behind every explanation and fear of rejection or criticism. Next time you hear someone explaining extensively why they did or didn't do something, listen deeper. The unconscious is telling you its story. You just need to read between the lines. Have you ever noticed that you start explaining and justifying when you feel uncomfortable, but language is only the surface? The third signal leads us to the core of all interpersonal dynamics, where the past dominates the present. The third signal shows itself in how people repeat old dramas in new relationships without realizing it. Consider this: an intelligent woman tells you about her new partner. After 3 months, she already describes him as distant and emotionally unavailable. She feels neglected, fights for his attention, interprets every small gesture as a sign of his lacking love. The strange thing, she had exactly the same complaints about her last 3 partners. Different men, identical conflicts. What's happening here? Freud called it transference, one of the most profound mechanisms of human psychology. Transference means we unconsciously project earlier relationship experiences onto new people. The unconscious treats every new partner like a familiar person from the past, usually parents or other formative figures. This woman perhaps had an emotionally absent father. As a child, she developed strategies to win his love. She became especially attentive, tried to read his moods, fought for signs of his affection. These patterns became deeply imprinted in her unconscious. Now, decades later, every new romantic relationship automatically activates these old programs. She sees in every partner potentially the absent father and reacts accordingly. She looks for distance, interprets normal behaviors as rejection, fights for a love she believes is threatened. Freud discovered We never love and hate only the person before us. We always also love and hate the ghosts of our past. This explains why intelligent people repeatedly fall into destructive relationship patterns. You recognize this signal through repetition. People who transfer always experience similar conflicts with different partners. They complain about the same problems, feel the same hurts, react with the same strategies. It becomes even clearer with disproportionate emotional reactions. When someone responds to small gestures with great fear or anger, they're probably fighting old wounds, not the current situation. A partner who flinches at a harmless comment might be hearing their mother's critical voice. A woman who panics over small delays might be experiencing her childhood abandonment anxiety. Transference works both ways. Not only romantic partners become parental figures, authority figures, friends or colleagues can also be unconsciously assigned old relationship patterns. The boss becomes the strict father, the best friend, the competing sister. The tragic thing about transference, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People who constantly look for rejection behave in ways that actually get them rejected. They create the reality they fear. Why is this important to you? Because transference prevents real intimacy. People in transference don't see you. They see projections of their past. They react to people who aren't in the room, fight conflicts that are long over. At the same time, recognizing transference offers the chance for healing. When you understand that someone's disproportionate reaction isn't really directed at you, you can respond more compassionately. You see the wounded childhood behind the adult behavior. Pay attention. What patterns repeat in your own relationships? What old stories do you tell in new situations? The fourth signal takes us even deeper, where the mind develops its most sophisticated self-deceptions. The fourth signal reveals itself when people provide brilliant logical explanations for decisions made purely emotionally. Picture this. A successful lawyer explains extensively why he broke his engagement. "We had different career goals," he says matter-of-factly. "Her plans didn't fit my 5-year strategy. Also, financial compatibility was problematic." He sounds rational, almost businesslike, but his hands tremble slightly, and he avoids eye contact when speaking of her. The truth, he panicked about intimacy and fled to the safety of his work. What are you experiencing here? Freud would immediately recognize rationalization, one of the subtlest and most dangerous defense mechanisms of human psychology. Rationalization transforms emotional truths into logical-sounding justifications. The unconscious cannot bear that important life decisions are driven by fear, shame, or repressed impulses. So the mind retroactively invents plausible, socially acceptable explanations. The lawyer rationalizes his attachment anxiety as career planning. A mother who over-controls her children speaks of responsibility and safety instead of acknowledging her own abandonment fears. A manager who sabotages a talented employee out of envy explains it as quality assurance and team dynamics. Freud recognized that the mind isn't the objective observer we think it is. It's the most skilled lawyer for the unconscious, always ready to dress any emotional decision in logical clothing. You recognize this signal by the perfection of the explanation. Rationalization produces flawless, almost too logical justifications. The person can explain minutely why their decision was sensible, but the emotional truth remains blocked out. Watch body language during the explanation. People who rationalize often show discrepancy between words and non-verbal communication. They speak of rational decisions with tense shoulders, avoid eye contact during logical arguments. Their voice becomes more monotone when presenting their thoughtful considerations. Particularly revealing are excessively complex explanations for simple human decisions. When someone needs 10 minutes to explain why they ended a friendship, they're probably struggling with repressed feelings like hurt, disappointment, or jealousy. The most dangerous aspect of rationalization, it works so perfectly that people lose their own emotional truths. They actually believe their rational explanations and lose access to their real feelings and needs. Freud warned that a psyche that rationalizes everything becomes emotionally numb. It can no longer make authentic decisions because it no longer feels what it truly wants or feels. Why should you recognize this signal? Because people who chronically rationalize don't understand themselves. They make seemingly logical decisions based on repressed emotions and wonder why they become unhappy. At the same time, recognizing rationalization gives you a key to understanding human motivations. Behind every perfect explanation usually hides a simple emotional truth: fear, longing, anger, love, or shame. Next time you hear a particularly eloquent justification, ask yourself, what feeling might this person be unable to express? Have you ever noticed that your own best arguments sometimes conceal your true feelings? The fifth signal leads us into the dark chambers of narcissism, where the ego develops its most sophisticated power games. The fifth signal shows itself in how people systematically diminish others to make themselves feel important. Imagine this. A colleague congratulates you on your promotion. Her first words are, "Congratulations." Though I'm honestly surprised, I would have thought they were looking for someone with more experience in this area, but maybe they want fresh perspectives deliberately. She smiles friendlily. Her voice sounds genuinely interested. But in seconds, she has questioned your competence, relativized your success, and positioned herself as the more experienced one. What's really happening? Freud and his successors would recognize narcissistic self-protection strategies, one of the subtlest and most destructive forms of psychological manipulation. The narcissistic unconscious cannot bear others being successful or happy without threatening its own self-worth. It therefore develops sophisticated strategies to devalue others while maintaining its own image. Hidden devaluation is particularly insidious. It comes packaged as compliment, advice, or concern. You look tired. Are you working too much really means you look bad. Your new partner is very nice translates to, but not particularly impressive. These people have learned to disguise their attacks as care. Freud recognized that the narcissistic ego is paradoxically extremely fragile. Behind apparent superiority hides self-worth that constantly needs external validation. When others succeed, the narcissistic unconscious automatically feels threatened and must counteract. Notice the technique of supposed help. Narcissistic people offer unsolicited advice, point out improvement opportunities, worry about your decisions. They position themselves as experts of your life while simultaneously creating a feeling of your inadequacy. Particularly revealing is the phenomenon of stolen stories. Tell them about a success, and immediately a bigger story of their own follows. Report a problem, and they've experienced the same, much worse. They can never just listen, they must always take the starring role. The signal becomes clearer in group situations. Narcissistic people cannot bear others being the center of attention. They interrupt, redirect conversations to themselves, or find subtle ways to monopolize attention. They often seem charming and sociable. Only observing the dynamics reveals their true motivation. Freud warned of the emotional exhaustion these people cause. They are energetic vampires who constantly suck validation without ever truly being able to give. Real empathy is impossible for them because they see others only as mirrors of their own self-worth. Why is this signal so important? Because narcissistic people systematically destroy relationships without consciously wanting to. They cannot help it. Their unconscious is programmed to devalue others to protect themselves. For you, this means real closeness with these people is impossible. They will always try to keep you small to feel big themselves. Every success of yours becomes their threat, every weakness their opportunity for superiority. Have you ever noticed how you systematically feel worse after conversations with certain people, even though they were friendly? The sixth and final signal leads us to the core of all human tragedies, where people repeatedly tear open their own wounds. The sixth signal reveals itself in the tragic tendency to repeatedly repeat the same destructive patterns, even though they make us unhappy. Picture this. An educated, successful woman sits across from you telling about her fourth failed relationship ending. Again, it was an emotionally unavailable man. Again, she spent months trying to rescue and win him. Again, she ended up hurt and confused. "I don't understand why I always attract the wrong ones," she says, yet she unconsciously describes a perfect pattern she's repeated for years. What drives her? Freud discovered one of the most puzzling aspects of human psychology: repetition compulsion. The unconscious forces us to repeatedly stage traumatic or unresolved experiences, in the unconscious hope of achieving a better ending this time. Freud recognized that the unconscious doesn't learn from negative experiences, as we might assume. Instead, it develops compulsive fascination with exactly the situations that hurt us. It's as if the psyche tries to heal old wounds by repeatedly tearing them open. This woman perhaps had an emotionally absent father. As a child, she developed the conviction, if I'm just good enough, loving enough, understanding enough, he'll finally love me. This belief became deeply imprinted in her unconscious. Now, as an adult, she unconsciously seeks partners who give her the opportunity to repeat this childhood struggle. Emotionally available men bore her. They offer no chance to resolve the old drama. Unavailable men immediately activate her old program, the desperate fight for love from a distant man. You recognize this signal through repetition combined with bewilderment. People in repetition compulsion are often surprised by their own patterns. They can rationally explain what's bad for them, but unconsciously they repeatedly choose exactly that. Watch for phrases like, "I don't know why this always happens to me. All men, women are the same. I just have bad luck in love, work, friendships." These people see themselves as victims of fate, yet they are unconscious directors of their own tragedies. Repetition compulsion becomes especially clear in people from destructive family backgrounds who reproduce similar dynamics in their own relationships. The daughter of an alcoholic mother marries an alcoholic. The son of a violent father becomes violent himself or seeks violent partners. Freud warned that repetition compulsion is stronger than the will to change. People can work on themselves for years, but if the unconscious pattern isn't recognized and broken, repetition wins. Why is this signal so important? Because it explains why intelligent, conscious people repeatedly make self-destructive decisions. They're not just fighting external circumstances, they're fighting the most powerful programs of their unconscious. At the same time, recognizing repetition compulsion holds the greatest chance for liberation. Those who understand which old dramas they unconsciously stage can begin writing new stories. The tragic part, without awareness, we are doomed to endlessly repeat our past mistakes. The liberating part, with awareness, we can break free from the prisons of our unconscious. What patterns do you repeat in your own life even though you rationally know they harm you? The answer to this question could be the key to your psychological freedom. Which city are you watching from? Comment down below.